Good afternoon to all of all the audience. Good afternoon to the panel. We have a very eminent panel, each bringing in their diversity of experience. At one end, we have a online retailer, a Bigbasket. We have traditional brick and mortar companies trying to get stronger. On the other side, we've got Reliance, who with their big moves is creating major upheavals. And we also have Kevin, who will bring in a bit of a business solution approach to that. And yes, COVID has been difficult times, and without food, we can't have any conversation. And we have certainly the representative from McDonald's. So you know what, guys? Digital technology, COVID, and COVID is here to stay. I guess it's a part and parcel of each of our lives. And I think in the context, words like skilling, reskilling, upskilling have become big buzzwords. And what we thought is we'll give you a bit of a we'll go down into the trenches and go maybe at sub levels to really understand, from each of the organization's perspectives as to what do these things really mean and what are we actually doing about it. So first question to the panel really, and let us start with Sandeep. In terms of what's the business case for your company, for your organization to really build a very solid agenda around skilling and reskilling and upskilling. And when I'm asking this question, I'm asking this question more in terms of the impact on specific jobs, impact on specific parts of the organization, which is leading for you to really create this agenda for your organization. Sandeep, are you on mute, please?
Yeah. So this agenda of entire reskilling, upskilling has been around for a while. I think it's not something which has started now in the COVID times. It was always on the agenda. It's just that COVID has accelerated this whole thing. And from our point of view, it's very clearly for a traditional brick and mortar player, predominantly high-end brick and mortar space. It is really the business case is really about how brick and mortar is now moving towards a more disruptive and innovative formats, which are aided by digital initiatives, which we are calling omni-channel approach, basically. So from our point of view, there are three areas which really are set to change. One, of course, is the whole customer experience piece, which is how do we ensure that irrespective whether the customer is being serviced through a physical retail or a online retail, how do we have seamless experience offline and online? And which means that the online journey, the in-store journey is really making way to a hybrid journey, which is more holistic and digital experience across the entire journey, specifically online when the order is placed, right from that when it is consumed, this entire new area really comes up as in terms of addressable from one of the areas which is we have to build capability for. Second area which we really see is the merchandising as well, which is currently again from a point of view of how it is from a physical retail point of view. How do we really now make sure that we tap into communities of social media, which is Instagrams and Facebooks and hashtags for real-time engagement and interaction with customers, leverage a lot of analytics in terms of derive customer insights and make sure we drive a lot of traffic onto these channels. And then how visual merchandising and store layouts only now are giving way to more hybrid world of virtual experiences to the customers who are visiting online, and also some digital kiosks as well. Third area which I think which is impacted or going to impact, which is quite universal, is the supply chain, which is linear supply chains will now give clearly way to shift towards a more dynamic and integrated supply chain work. And when I say this, I'm also adding on to add the logistics and the warehousing itself. which is set to change big time in terms of the whole delivery time and the experience of the customers, and more automation likely to happen. So this is the business case actually in these 3 years, which I see from my organization perspective really changing.
Thank you, Sandeep. And I guess some of them are pretty common to most of us, in the retail space. Chithra, a lot of moves, big moves being made by Reliance. And if I go one level below, can you focus your response maybe a little bit, at a specific level to say within broad families or within broad employee segments, what seems to be the business case for you guys?
Hey, sure. Thank you for having me. So the accelerated digital transformation which COVID brought in had different talent implications for various retail businesses of Reliance. For our digitally born businesses, right, nothing pretty much has changed. We had to kind of cater to the higher demand from an upskilling and reskilling perspective, not a disruptive change there. However, for our offline businesses, it was an accelerated change which was required with respect to understanding the changed consumer behavior, right? Imagining what could be that consumer behavior, because consumer has a certain anxiety even visiting an offline store now, and what it implied for the various employee segments. For example, for our store operations, right, our employees versus the stock and inventory competencies, they had to focus on a facilitation competency of wide range of interactive consumer experience, managing a digital kiosk to managing digital payments to adapting new ways in which a customer would like to use a trial room, and also a customer would like to be serviced. And also the store employees had to kind of manage one fine morning the pressures of multi-channel sales. And the technology advancement and tech savviness, which is expected in the new world, was a very interesting phenomena. And I want to kind of place on record and thank our 1 lakh employees on the stores for quickly adapting to it. And in the future, tech savviness is something which we would like to kind of integrate into hiring of our store employees right from the talent acquisition stage. Another area which Sandeep touched upon was buying and merchandising. So while we hire buying and merchandising, let's say, for example, in fashion and lifestyle, right, there is some amount of weightage which we place on the product knowledge, which in the omni-channel digital world has sort of changed into the tech savviness and the ability to take data and metric-based real-time decisions, which can translate into action of now. And also a higher level of comfort and understanding with consumer-centric experiences powered by AI personalization. For our marketing teams, it has been around social media marketing and digital marketing, performance marketing versus, the brand marketing. Even for our technology teams, right, we had to make new investments in cybersecurity, in UI, UX, and robotics, also in the field of supply chain, to be able to cater to the new demands of supply chain, as well as the new challenges which was posed by the surge of online shopping.
Okay. Diya, you kept us going, during the COVID times, and thank you so much for that. How's your firm looking at this issue of upscaling and reskilling?
Right. I think very similar spaces we are all battling, being from the same fraternity. And I think a lot of what Sandeep and Chithra said would be relevant to us. I think for us, it was more a shift on focus of leveraging assets where, earlier brick and mortar was your main and you were trying to build the e-commerce space to suddenly being completely dependent on that channel. But I think what it really leaves us with, as in terms of a business case, is towards the end, the new business model that one is looking at. I think the skills that we're looking at rebuilding are largely 4, and I know both Sandeep and Chithra touched upon it in certain ways. One is integrating this entire digital view, be it for the Omni customer view. The second is the whole cognitive piece, whether it's for leaders or your employees, because both at a critical thinking level, as well as your ability to project manage, and that's what's going to create agility for the businesses as they move ahead. The third one would be the emotional and social well-being, while I think most organizations picked it up as we move forward into the pandemic. That will continue to be a space because we'll have to navigate through this together. And I think the last one will largely be about saying, how do you build adaptability and resilience? Because these business models are going to evolve, because the blueprints of AI and automation aren't really moving away. So these are the four real buckets I think we will continue to solve for as we move ahead in terms of a background or the landscape that we are solving for.
And thank you so much for that, Diya. Very often we kind of confuse digital to be really a driving force behind everything that we do. But you're clearly articulating the point that digital is just perhaps an enabler. And in your context, it is really the fundamental business model change that is really driving the need for reskilling and upskilling. And that's a very, very powerful insight, Diya. Thank you so much for that. Hari, very clearly, you're way ahead on many of these aspects around digital, right? And if you view this as on a continuum, what's next for you in terms of upskilling and reskilling for Bigbasket?
Shekhar, very frankly, I feel a bit of I'm an odd man out in this group because in some ways we are an online company already, a digital first and an online commerce company. But I think we've always said that we are a retail company. We are not a tech company. Unlike companies like, let's say, Flipkart, which have always, or Amazon that have claimed to be tech companies who are also doing retail. We've always said that we are a retail company, which is a tech-enabled business. But I think having said that, on the technology side, we have always done the right things. Whatever offline is trying to adapt to, I think that's been our DNA from day one. We've had all the functions like analytics, digital marketing. Those are the functions which are truly very, very critical and key for us. So I think all the talent has been built out in those functions. Those functions are cutting edge. We've recruited the right kind of people. So I think for us, it is doing bit of the more, I would say, continue to do what we have done. And maybe at some point of time, online will just be seen as one more channel. It will not be seen as just an online commerce company. So I think just as the physical stores are trying to go online, someday maybe Bigbasket will try and go offline. We might open some offline stores, especially in the fruits and vegetables section. It's very much possible. So I think just as physical is trying to learn the digital skills, I think someday we will end up having to learn how to do the physical, merchandising, how to set up stores, how to do in-store business, how to optimize stores, how to pick the right locations. So I think those are some things that my sense is that we may end up learning. But I don't see that happening in the immediate future. But sometime I'm sure that is bound to happen because online is just going to be one channel. Customers will want alternatives. It just cannot be that we will deliver stuff at home and we don't have a physical store for you.
Yeah, no, very clearly. I think, again, linking this to the business model change that, Bigbasket may see some time ahead. Kevin, you must be witnessing a lot of companies going through this, process and trying to find their feet around the subject. Any one or two key insights based on your experience of different companies? What do you see happening?
Yeah, I echo everything that everyone has said, especially Hari was saying he's the odd man out. I thought I was going to feel like the odd man out because you guys are all retailers here and I'm coming from a HR perspective. So thanks everyone. So here are some of the baseline hypotheses that I'd like to share with the audience before going ahead. So I personally believe that COVID is here to stay. There's going to be a long-lasting fear factor that isn't going to vanish anytime soon because of what we have just gone through. As we all know, fear lingers on for a very much longer time. Confidence will take time to recover again. Personally, I believe that contact tracing is the solution, suppression and containment, however, not elimination. Having said that, retail therapy as we know it, and we are all among retail therapists here, is always going to be staying here for retail therapy. And there's a very strong psychological phenomenon around retail therapy, which gives people their personal identity, their gratification, whether it's instant or delayed. People have no reason why they enjoy buying, but retail therapy gives them that sense of, symbol, status, wealth, self-worth, So retail is always going to be here. And what's interesting is whether it's online or offline, whether it's a luxury item that is in the millions or hundreds of thousands, or just something small from Flipkart, it really doesn't matter on the quantum, because the definition of self-worth, self-symbol, identity is really like beauty in the eye of the beholder. So what I'd like to share with the audience here is going back to the basics. Going back to the basics and being brilliant at the basics, which means that giving an excellent user experience. You know, buying stuff online during this kind of times has totally removed the interaction that once what we understand as commerce, which is really the interaction between human beings. And the economies of in-commerce means that there is a meaningful conversation. But today, the conversation happens with chatbots, AIs. It's so transactional. And I like to challenge the retailers here today among all the big boys. How can we create a hybrid new world out there where we bring in mental health awareness and infuse that with retail therapy? Giving the feel-good factor that you can actually purchase something with the money that you have. Again, quantum is not the issue, but having someone treat you, listen to you, be a personal shopper, be a person who really, truly, authentically cares for you. Now, today we know that mental health awareness is definitely a growing issue. And if this new norm continues, I personally believe that mental acuteness is something that we cannot ignore. So whether it's something that we buy from Flipkart or when we go to shop at the LVMHs, it doesn't matter. We must find that ability to allow consumers to interact with others. So very quickly, because we are in the HR space and also in the consulting space, we'd like to share some of the new job clusters, not so much the job title, but more so the kind of job clusters that are coming about because of what I see as the talent bind. The talent bind, essentially, we are seeing the compression of two areas of two polar extremes, where we have a supply excess in the hospitality, F&B, airlines, and travel. That's an area that has too much of people not having enough jobs. And then on the other hand, where there's a pent-up demand that is not even being satisfied, is the healthcare, IT, and logistics. How can we look at that talent double bind and reconfigure and re-engineer the displaced workers into 7 key job clusters? The first clusters is the generators. They are usually the salespeople who can build relationships. Then we've got the artisans. They are very good at using their hand, their manual, and they just love creating things with their hands. We've got the carers who love providing service to community. They are the people who have a heart of gold. They care for people naturally. That's their natural instinct. We have the informers, who are people who are educators, whether they are educators in the teaching line or they educate people with a new product or they educate in a new financial product, but they just love sharing their knowledge and experience. Then we've got coordinators. We call them the back office people, but their work goes unnoticed, but they are key. They are coordinators, the designers, and the technologists. Like what Hari was saying just now, I truly support that idea where, you know, there are people who are using technology as the main front, but it will never be the mainstay. It's always going to be the enabler. So how can we harness individuals' key talents, their natural talents? For example, someone who's a strong generator profile with a strong carer's personality. Now that's strong sales and relationship building, and at the same time, they care for others. How can we position them compared to someone who's a very strong technologist and an artisan who loves using technology but has an eye for aesthetic looks and manual work or using their hands to make things look beautiful? How can we get them into a position where they can create a greater user experience? Now,
Kevin, please pardon me. I'm gonna pause you here in the
sure, go ahead.
But I think you bring in a very, very powerful perspective of emerging roles and how we might leverage the best of each of these roles to really create a superior impact. And your call out on the entire mental wealth and wellness for operating managers vis-a-vis their employees and for HR teams. And I think that is something that we are staring at. In the interest of time, I'm just going to request all panel members to be a little bit sharp in their responses and to the point, so that we try and cover our agenda for today. So with the brief background that we picked up from each one of you, I'm again going to do a quick round robin to say, can you give us the audience one area of disproportionate focus for you in the area of reskilling and upskilling? Just one area. And what might be the biggest success factor for you in that specific area? Diya, you want to go? You want to start with that? Just one area which will make disproportionate impact, and one key success criteria in that area for you.
So I think over here, digital learning in terms of both critical and non-critical factors, because that's the need of the hour for us to revisit and define what's going to be critical skills and non-critical skills that are scalable, because that's going to give you the speed to move ahead.
Sure. Thank you. Hari?
Quickly, Shekhar, reskilling, upskilling is not on our agenda at all.
Hari, forget about reskilling, upskilling.
I'll respond to you. So quickly, I think if you had to just pick one thing, I think it is during the times of the pandemic, how do you ensure that leaders are able to let go? Because, they don't get to do those meetings that they did face-to-face. They don't get to do those reviews. So how do they feel comfortable letting go, trusting people, empowering them to do what they're supposed to do, and not stressing them out?
Sure. You're in a way responding to my next question, but I'll come to that in a bit. Sandeep?
Yeah. So without talking any specific area, before we get into any big bang investments into supply chain or merchandising or other areas, I think the basic demand creation is important. And I resonate to what Divya said, is to create the whole ecosystem in terms of understanding the digital needs, which is the basic tools of customer experience and uses of design thinking. This is what we are planning to make sure that this is spread out. We create enough demand, and basically as a step one, there's the activation of mindsets, which paves the way for a more deeper learning and more ideas to really come in. So you become a learning organization. That's what.
Okay. Thank you. Chithra?
Well, so for our offline business, while there would be a broader investment in technology enabling tools, across levels, across roles, we are going to intensely focus on real-time data and metric-based decision making. For our online business, I allude to what Hari mentioned. So as an organization, we will have to get comfortable in managing virtual teams and, going outcome-based management. So that's a comfort which we are looking at building specifically for our online teams.
Sure. My third question, and Kevin, let's start with your response to this. It's a little difficult time emerging from the ashes of COVID and preparing for life beyond COVID as well, right? We don't know how long COVID will stay, but let's assume it's going to be around for some time. It is certainly going to lead to many permanent structural changes in organizations, for all of us in various aspects. And the role of leadership, is certainly at an ultra premium. And leadership is not necessarily only the CEOs. It could be the CEO. It could be, leadership at all levels. From a lens of reskilling and upskilling, what would your call out be to leaders in the industry? It needn't be retail industry. It could be across the board, other industries that you talked about.
Right.
Three from your side.
Okay.
Just three.
Right. Okay. So retailers are very well positioned to take advantage of this big change. Firstly, adopt a paradoxical approach. Leaders must still run a profitable business. Today, technology is more advanced than ever. It gives the ability to use omni channels, but that's what I call the hard skills. But the soft side of it, which is empowering the front line, having the right soft skills, the right mental mindset, the right heart to care for those people. It's not just selling or buying something. It's not a transaction. You're dealing with a human being. And retail frontliners have that opportunity to be put in those positions to impact having a conversation, having the heart to have that caring conversation. It's not about what you sell, it's not how expensive you sell it, but if you can place that right mindset, that business itself empowered with technology to create productivity, efficiency, higher profits, that's great for business. And at the same time, paradoxically, you can manage the softer side of the business, which is bringing a caring experience or user experience to your customers. Thank you.
Sure. Hari?
Yeah, very, very quickly, I think, Shekhar, this COVID or pandemic is really a time of uncertainty. So I think the question really is what kind of leadership traits work best in uncertain times. And my view is that two capabilities need to be built across all levels in all leaders. And the first is, understanding the difference between intellect and character and developing more of character. Because intellect is something, is what is when you know what is right, whereas character is in being able to act on that. A lot of people know what is right and what is wrong, but very few people are able to act based on that knowledge. So I think developing character is an important one. The second one I would say is everyone needs to bring a blend of the masculine and the feminine traits of leadership or the styles of leadership. And I don't mean men and women by masculine and feminine. They're just traits associated that way. So I think it's very important, the very notorious masculine traits of achievement orientation, goal orientation, being seen as strong should be balanced with being very caring, bringing in an atmosphere of collaboration and all of that. So I think these two traits are extremely essential in times of uncertainty.
Okay. Diya?
So yeah, I think one of the biggest call-outs that I'd make is about the way the teams are experiencing the brand through the leaders, and how do leaders now put on, kind of adorn that characteristic. And I think it would be a little bit, very similar to what Mr. Hari was saying, is that people are going to solely experience the brand through their leaders. And while there is the agility and the decision making and, the goal setting happening, how does that empathy and connect happen? And empathy could be in small ways, like, for us, when you're moving from being a business which is offline and online, suddenly that empathy with the frontline sales force, when you are got distressed consumers coming in who are constantly navigating with new products and technology, right? Are we thinking about those spaces? So I think that's about, the way I would look at it, because that's a change from a leadership point.
Sure. Sandeep, most important leadership call out for you?
For me too, one is how, what has happened in the COVID times is that COVID has really got overhyped and everybody started to do very different things. The ability of the leadership team to bring back the basic fundamentals, that while business has fundamentally changed, but the fundamentals of doing business will never change. I mean, there is no substitute to customer experience, whether it is offline, online. To bring back the organization to focus on this aspect, I think is number one important thing. And secondly, how leaders are taking the ownership of leading the change, which means what is really happening outside. And for that, how do I respond to the change inside are the two things I would call it out.
Sure. Chithra?
Yeah, the speed and scale of this whole disruption of COVID. So two things which we are focusing is imagineering and empathy. When I say imagineering, in that post-COVID world or in the current scenario, especially for our offline business, what would be the consumer behavior, and working backward to deliver that consumer experience, and also having the deep empathy, because now it's gig economy, remote style of working, and we still do not know what is that long-term impact it would have on employee engagement and collaborative way of working. So it's very important that as leaders, as managers, we are insisting on the empathy which is required to manage our teams, while we go very aggressive outcome based to have the deep empathy for our consumers and for our employees at the same time.
Okay, great. I have one last question, but before that, I want to take a question that's come to me from the audience, and maybe Diya, you can try and respond to this. The question is, how do you determine what kind of employees need what kind of reskilling?
I think it really is as simple as if you stay true to what is you changing in their environment or their deliverables. So if your focus is on on speed or accuracy or whatever it be in terms of quality, that's exactly what you need to focus on. Don't complicate it. Stay true to the change you're making. And if you're focused on calling out the exact change, you will be able to identify the need. And more than anything else, keep the employee or the incumbent involved in what they need.
Sure.
They're closest to it, yeah.
Sure. Chithra, you want to take a shot at this?
Sure. So we have started this journey to identify, what to be reskilled. So what we have done is we have prioritized certain roles where how they interact with the consumer has changed considerably. Look at, what is the task, and we are taking a best shot at what task would remain manual, what task could be technology enabled. And that's how we are working backward on specific roles and the upskilling which is required on certain roles.
Okay. There's another question, and I think this is the eternal question that we all struggle with. How would you define the ROI of reskilling? Any thoughts, Kevin?
Well, I think you're too kind to me. You're leaving the toughest question for me. Right. So I think ROI in this sense could be of two areas, at least two areas. Clearly, monetary value is one of it, right? I think earlier on, I can't remember who mentioned this. One of our speakers was talking about the using Omni channels, Instagram, and then social media and all that. I think today, a lot of the value is placed on the brand goodwill. Not just the monetary value. The more people are reposting, their experience, their user experience, the feedback they're giving, that is definitely a goodwill value that clearly today translates into the brand value. So that's a goodwill perspective. And then, of course, the second ROI in retail, personally, I've seen some of our customers measure ROI not just from the financial return, but more of how much of the employees' engagement is able to be successfully created a culture, ecosystem that's going to help retention. Because all we know, retailers suffer from high attrition and high turnover rates of employees. Now, the amount of money spent to retrain, hire, manage them in and out and all that, that's a lot of unmeasured dollar value going out the door. So I'm not just going to use ROI from how much profit you make, because profitability is in context of whether you have got great blockbuster programs or blockbuster products. Now, that's something that is beyond anyone's control. Luck has to do with it as well. But within your control as an organization is how we keep that engagement and reduce retention. And that also should be calculated as part of ROI.
Okay. As some of us will start on this whole journey of reskilling and upskilling, what might be one or two pockets of resistance that you may have faced or we should be ready to deal with, and how should we mitigate that resistance? Chithra, any insights from your organization?
I guess this whole scale and speed of pandemic, there is some amount of consensus in our offline world that there is a need for reskilling. Right now, like in any change, we will have to articulate very clearly to employees that how it is going to personally benefit them. And we are also looking at this as an opportunity for making retail an extremely interesting career path for our entry-level retail employees. We're also encouraging our store employees to kind of take technical courses outside of their core jobs. So we are positioning the whole reskilling in a way on how it is going to benefit them, how they can move within the larger Reliance ecosystem or the larger retail ecosystem in the country. Today, you could be in stores, and how tomorrow you can actually move into buying and merchandising or even marketing. And we have opened up the online learning opportunity fully funded by the employer and driven by the managers. And we find a lot of good adoption by employees to it. So making it bite-sized, making it connecting to the millennials is the way to kind of go ahead and executing it. Very consistent marketing on how it is going to be beneficial to them is very key for adoption.
Sure. Thanks, Chithra. Hari, from your ecosystem point of view, any insights on managing resistance to change, or anything from your perspective?
Nothing really, Shekhar, because we're not pushing for any change, so I can't imagine resistance. So I'll pass this question.
Okay, Sandeep, any bit from your side?
Yeah, I think the COVID-19 has really paved the way for this change to really come in. So I would see a lesser resistance, but at the same time, if all of us are able to answer the question from the employee perspective in terms of what is in it for me, I think that the business case becomes much easier. So a lot of recognition when you go for upskilling and co-creating this entire wave along with the employee support itself to cascade it down, I think works well, which is a tried and tested method. That's what we will learn for.
Okay, lovely. Last question, and this is really a personal question. I'm trying to upskill, reskill myself, as far as understanding a lot more around technology. That is my personal investment that I'm trying to do, because at the rate at which things are moving, I think I'm going to be outdated pretty soon. What are some of your areas that you are focusing for your own upskilling and reskilling? Just maybe a short one-word, two-word response in the interest of time. Diya?
I think hybrid and gig workforce is something that I'm really looking at.
Okay, lovely. Hari, should I ask you this question?
Yeah, surely. So I think, reskilling, upskilling, I think has been a constant exercise. It's not just related to the pandemic. So in the lockdown, I've written 3 books and 3 more are in the pipeline. So that is enough for me. I think I find ways to fulfill myself.
Lovely, lovely. Kevin?
For me, I think it's back to basics. While technology is there, I don't hope that you will break your back over it. Like what Hari says, it's an enabler. Back to basics, and being brilliant at your basics is what I would like to say.
Sure. Sandeep?
Yeah, it's a continuum. It's a constant journey. For me, it's a new industry. So I am really challenging myself more from employee as a customer point of view, trying to probe new areas, whether it is frontline or the backend, and challenging myself. How could I improvise the experience of the frontline as well as backend employees?
Yeah, thank you. Chithra?
Well, it's a continuous journey, but then we all react to the priority of the time as well. And Reliance is in a hyper growth mode. So, but at this point in time, we are actually focusing on how to use real-time people analytics to be able to make data-based, metric-based decisions, which has an impact on business.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much, to the panel. I think you brought in different perspectives. Some of you have taken contrarian positions, which makes all the more discussion more engaging. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm sure the audience has walked away with some insights and some thoughts on how to take this agenda forward in their respective organizations. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Shekhar. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to all the panelists for such an enriching session. After this session, we have a video from Kaya. Let's take a look from it. So that was a very impactful video. Now, without wasting any more time, we move to the third panel of the day. Over to you, Bhakti.
Thanks, Bhumika. Let's move on to the last panel of the day. The topic for this panel is rethinking performance management for new work structures. And the panel is moderated by Priya Pillai, Head HR, Retail and Corporate Functions, Titan Company Limited. And the panelists are Rahul Pinjarkar, Director HR, Trent Hypermarket Limited, Mukta Nakara, Head HR, Marks and Spencer, Reliance India Private Limited, Anjali Goyal, HR Head, V-Mart Retail Limited, Aniruddha Mahajan, Customer Care Associate and AVP, Human Resources, Shoppers Stop, and Bhupesh Dhingar, Director, Enrich Hair and Skin Solution, Private Limited. Over to you, Priya.
Thank you, Bhakti. And it was certainly a very interesting session on the reskilling, and that's paved a way for our session now. And I think this is very close to everybody's heart, which is on the performance management in a year specific like this. And I want to once again warmly welcome all my fellow panelists. Thank you so much for taking time and being part of this, and also agreeing to candidly share some of the learnings and the practices and insights that you have gone through in your journey. So I have the tough job of moderating this exciting panel, so I'll try and do my best. And I'm also sure that there will be a lot of questions, hopefully coming from the audience as well. So we've thought of some aspects that would perhaps be information that the audience here would be wanting to listen to. So let's start with the first question, which is, and specific to the retail industry. You know, we are in a sector which is, which is spatial constraints, or also has proximity requirements, very different from industries like IT. And we have perhaps been one of the most affected in this COVID situation. So what I want to open the question with, and would like to invite Bhupesh and Mukta to actually share their perspective on how COVID has impacted performance systems, how has it impacted goal setting, and is the impact seen for a short term, or is it looked at something that will be here from a medium to long term? So let me start with Mukta, and then maybe Bhupesh, you can give us some of your insights as well.
Sure. Thank you so much, Priya. And what a pleasure it is to be with everyone today. And thank you, Priya, for getting us kickstarted straight away. So indeed, extremely interesting times that we've been part of. COVID, has COVID impacted performance system? It absolutely has. And that's linked to the fact that, organizational priorities evolved over the last few months. Initially the focus was around protecting the cash, and all efforts were around managing cost at that point in time. Now, as business head towards the road to, of recovery, while cash will continue to play an important role, the driving factor from here on is focus on turnover and ensuring that, you're able to get the customers back in the stores and make them feel safe and help them shop. Now, how did this impact performance? Was clearly the fact that, what you were focusing on in the past was not suddenly that important. The focus around conversations, around the empathy, around people aspect became so important and had to be integrated through the entire process of continuous performance management. So in the first half of the year, the goals itself was set keeping in mind the priorities that the business had at that point in time. Look at cost, look at cash. How can we find every single opportunity to ensure that we're becoming more lean, the structures, etc. Everything changed, right? And that had to percolate top down. So what we did at M&S was we created a vision of what is it that we were thinking our recovery path to be, and a little bit of, a combination of what we were seeing some of the other markets who were ahead of us on the curve, learning from them, as well as trying to take you a lot from gut, because there was no ready-made playbook for one to be thinking about, this is how, let's plug and play. So H1 priorities were defined very differently, and we started a journey of goal setting on a monthly basis, because things were moving very, very quickly. So and the entire focus was to stabilize the business. From there, now as we get to the road to recovery, our focus is now shifting to how do we optimize opportunities to serve the customers to ensure that the cash registers continue to keep clocking in. And hence, all efforts are about how do you commit yourself to trading? What are the things that you're going to do differently to be prepared to be obsessed about customer service? I think suddenly those aspects are now becoming very, very prominent in the business. Now, keeping a view of what is going to remain long term, I think it's the whole process of those continuous conversations, quickly adapting and changing wherever needed, because the situation will continue to remain fluid. If we look at some of the markets who were ahead of us are now actually seeing a second turn of the lockdown. We don't know what's ahead of us. We genuinely don't know. So we can't really predict in the long run what's going to happen, but what is needed is the process of those continuous conversations to remain an integrated part of the culture, to say, are we doing the right things for the business? And it's relevant. And I understand as an employee who's sitting on the shop floor to say this is still contributing to where the business wants me to contribute. But the ethos, the compassion, the safety, the health, the continuous support to people is now integrated in that performance process as something that's going to last for a long, long time, because the way you do things has changed. It's the what that needs continuous adjustment. If that helps, Priya.
Thanks, Mukta. Thanks so much. I also Bhupesh, I think here is an organization that's gone through a huge change management in the process, in this journey, and something that's really unheard of, and certainly, very interesting to hear that yesterday. So would like you to share your experience, Bhupesh, on the performance management at Enrich.
Thanks, Priya. Yeah, I think our sector was very different. We were among we are in a business that is in close proximity to the customer. We actually touch the customer, and that suddenly became taboo, became a no-no. So we were among the first industries to lock down. We actually shut down some of the salons before the lockdown happened. And we also happened to be one of the last industries to open up. And that was what really, really hit us. But the fact is, fundamentally, we believed that our industry, our sector, the need for grooming is honestly is inherent, is natural. And with due respect to the fellow panelists, I mean, you're more likely to get groomed and get a haircut done rather than go buy an extra shirt, with due respect to everybody in the panel. So very clearly on, we decided that we will not let go of staff. There is potential. We might reduce our salary bill. And despite having limited revenue in March and almost no revenue in April and May, we did not let go of anybody. We kept paying full salary for the first few months. But when we realized it's not going to last, we had to do something to manage our costs. We kept doing that on one side. But if I have a reduced salary bill, what is the best way to distribute that? How do I ensure that the distribution of the salary bill goes to the performers, and the passenger should very clearly get a message that, look, I'm not contributing as much. And I think in the month of May or June, some salons just began to open up in Gujarat and Karnataka, but the bulk of our salons, which is Western India, had not opened up yet. So we had hardly any revenue coming in. And then we took a big, I think, decision. Like most companies have a fixed pay and a variable pay. I think we did a lot of communication to convert everybody to a variable pay model. And that was a fundamental philosophical change. We had to actually hold a series of webinars to communicate in a transparent manner why we are doing what we are doing. You know what the other industries are doing. You know what the other salons in the beauty industry are doing. But why we believe that this is the best path forward. And then we actually renegotiated our terms of contract. We actually converted everybody to some sort of a variable pay and used that. We did a lot of modeling and figured out that, look, if you do the right things, an individual performer can actually get much better money compared to last year. One of the advantages we have is almost 60-70% of our team members are direct contributors to revenue. While on the shop floor, they are the skilled technicians, they can earn money. And therefore, we then remodeled everything and said, look, these are a bunch of input parameters that are in your control, that you can influence. And if you do the right things, you will get the right earnings. Focus on what you can control, what you can influence. What are the lead factors that you have? The revenue is the lag factor. Focus on client experience, the client repeat. That's much more in your control. And we actually had to change the entire business model, completely. Because the fact is, as I said, almost 70-80% of our team can measure their performance. So they know where they're heading to. Interestingly, if we come back to the topic of performance appraisal, we know that the annual performance appraisal is not relevant anymore. We have to live on a quarter-to-quarter basis. It's like on a rolling quarter basis. Yet, the team member could say, look, I slogged the entire year till the month of March. Where has that gone into? Like the annual increment you give. So when we remodeled the payout, we built in the performance of the last year would affect your earning this year for every transaction. It's a very fundamentally different way of doing it. So while we changed everything around, the employee, we found that if you are a performer, you were actually earning, or you could earn as much as, or if not more, compared to the last year. So while businesses probably come back to maybe 60% or 65% of last year, there are people in our team who are actually earning as much as, or if not more than last year, clearly differentiating the performer and the non-performer for things that are in his control. And that, I think, helped. The rolling horizon thinking of everything quarter to quarter, that makes more sense. Like for like is not relevant anymore. A month on month is probably more relevant. So while we did that, and you keep measuring the employee mood on a monthly basis, it is probably, I think, more important that responsiveness or agility and fairness is probably more relevant than precision and perfection. And once we got that thought process, let's be responsive. We've done something, the operating conditions have changed, the environment changed, the business environment changed. Some salons have opened, some salons have not opened yet. We've got a second lockdown, whatever be the condition. My building may be sealed, the place where I have my salon. How do I hold the employee responsible for that? And we kept doing that. Be responsive, be agility, be fair, and communicate and over-communicate. So we had a series of videos to over-communicate, and that, I think, brought transparency, brought trust, and that probably helped us. So while the team is fully aware, there's no performance appraisal of the traditional annual side, but every month on month, they are being evaluated, and whatever they do today is going to affect their performance. They can earn more money. And that's, I think, the fundamental thinking change we did.
I must say, Bhupesh, fairly bold decisions taken during these times, and certainly some valuable lessons. And I think for me, some key takeaways are, in Marks and Spencer's, the way the agility is applied in the goal setting, looking at it month to month, which is something that you also mentioned. And I think a lot of organizations are really looking at it from day to day and month to month basis because of the changing situations, and making sure that everybody is geared to the business priority, be it in the top line or be it bottom line, even saving costs. And you rightly said, Bhupesh, I think business models are undergoing changes. And there are a lot of places where I think there are, we've seen that the models have changed. There are renegotiating of terms that are happening. But I think it's the first time I'm hearing that an organization has actually gone through renegotiating also the terms for employees and making it more variable. And also good to hear that some of the earnings are far higher than what they were earning earlier during these times as well. My next question is addressed to Rahul and Anjali. And I know, Rahul, you have a very different perspective and a very contrarian view. I think yours is one industry where perhaps the impact has been quite divergent. So if you can share with us how in retail, and there are different functions, right? The front end, back end operations, IT, digital, and all. I think a lot of this came alive in the various discussions this year because many of their roles also kind of diametrically changed in this situation. So how has that impacted how we measure performance and how have KPIs started to look different. Are they looking different? In some industries, it perhaps is not. But there are some interesting practices in Trent hypermarket as well that Rahul, you are sharing. Maybe it'll be good if you could share in this forum as well. And Anjali, if you can also share on some of how you customize some of these KPIs specifically for your leadership team. Over to you.
Thanks, Priya. It is good to be in this forum. Now, before I share, I think one learning which I had in last 20 years of my career is performance management needs to be seen in a very, very contextual manner. Okay. There are so many articles and studies floating around performance management and the ideal system, and the ideal system that an organization should adopt or should do away with. The question I've always been asking is that, is there an ideal performance management system? And my experience tells me no. Like there is no ideal political system, there is no cookie cutter performance management system that, all organizations can universally adopt. The idea is to create a system that meets the organizational objectives and enable an exceptional performance culture. I think that's the predominant objective that we also look at when we see performance management in the context of Trent hypermarket. So we have told ourselves that we will do 3-4 things in order to deploy a PMS in the organization. The first and foremost is we got to reward our top guys disproportionately. Okay, we often forget an important question that how do you reward your best employee? The basic tenet of any performance management is to enable superior performance. And for that, we got to reward and differentiate superior performance. Now here, we always look at the 80-20 rule, that we call it as a Pareto principle, which states that 80% of the effects occurs due to 20% of the causes. This means your top performers contribute a lot more than your average performers. So from the simplicity standpoint, we looked at performance management process is applicable to people beyond a certain level. Okay, so we have bottom of the pyramid guys, which are executives, senior executive, up to assistant managers, 60% of our total population. We have decided that we will look at their variable pay as completely depending on the company performance, which essentially means that you're working for the company. If company does well, you get, your company doesn't do well, there is a flip side to it. Second important factor that, we are constantly telling ourselves that feedback, and only feedback. Continuous and year-round feedback is the backbone of any performance management process. And it comes as a surprise that, feedback is often the most overlooked aspect of the process. And therefore, we have always encouraged managers that don't depend on the year-long process. Keep giving feedback, as Bhupesh was mentioning, quarterly. We tell them that, keep giving on-the-job instant feedbacks to people. Okay. Often performance management has tended to be a yearly or biannually process. And we have told them that, this is not the way we will look at it. And hence, people who are above the manager level, we have conceptualized the process that, some portion of your variable pay depends on company performance and individual performance. Okay. And we have decoupled that variable pay from the performance appraisal. Okay. We have made it more an employee-driven process, and we have told that your performance appraisal is your responsibility. If you don't initiate it, the managers will not take the responsibility to do your appraisals. We have also, this is the issue that we are still grappling with, but we tell ourselves that while it is important to pay for performance, a good performance management system should focus on the feedback, which means compensation must be decoupled from the performance conversations our employees are having with. But isn't this out of the sync with point 1 that I was talking about? Yes, but compensation, we have told ourselves and our managers that compensation has always been the proverbial elephant in the room, which managers and employees sit down for the performance review discussion. And we tell them that we will always have a finite budget when it comes to reward and compensation. But employee feedback is infinite. So coming back to the simplicity, from the decoupling standpoint, we have a process which says 50% of your variable pay depends on company performance. We look at performance quarterly and we start paying them on quarterly basis. The 50% depends on individual performance, which is again a KPI driven. So for a category, you look at category top line, category RGM. For the functions, we look at cost, so on and so forth. For the new store opening department, we look at how many stores you open vis-a-vis the targets that you have for the property projects, so on and so forth. Okay. So our performance management process is completely delinked from variable pay payment. Now, what an employee does to make those results happen is the effort that one puts. We looked at that as an effort-based process and started rating people on what is one doing to make that, store or business profitable. Suppose we have a store in a very, very good catchment, and if the store is doing well, doesn't necessarily mean that the store manager is an excellent performer, and vice versa. If the store is not doing well, doesn't mean that the store manager is a bad performer. And therefore, we looked at efforts, and we have created a simple process that whether you are meeting expectation when it comes to putting efforts to get those results, 3-point rating scale. And we looked at 3 simple competencies: result focused, customer focused, and people focused. And we have created a behavioral anchors around that. And again, a 3-point rating scale, whether you are meeting expectation, not meeting expectation, or exceeding expectation. Basis that everyone gets a rating on a 9-box grid, and we arrive at a percentage increment, which is purely on our affordability to play. So I think this is something which has worked for us. Okay. While I say that, we also have a very strong people review process, which we do it in the month of September, October, to look at who are those guys who have a spark and who have a capability and capacity to take the extra responsibilities. And okay, those people needs to be looked at little differently from the career standpoint. So I think these are the 3-4 things which we have told ourselves, and I don't claim that this is the right thing to adopt, but I think this has been working for our business. And coming back to the COVID times, we are the business which are outside the purview of disaster management guidelines. We are into essential services. The stores were open from day one. And, we have been encouraging people by getting them back to stores. Okay. So we look at efforts, we look at results, and basis which we have devised the performance management process.
Thanks, Rahul. Thank you so much. Anjali, over to you.
Yeah, hi, a very good evening to all of you. I think we're all caught up in this maze of finding the right way to address performance management and keeping the existing circumstances. I don't think so there is a one-size-fits-all approach to this management of how do we assess performance. But today's point of performance management is not to categorize performance, I feel. It is how do we increase or enhance performance. The approach has to be more flexible, and we need to continuously adopt a continuous recalibration of the measures and the goals. I think the goals has to be more short-term, as Bhupesh also mentioned, and it has to be more quarterly based, seeing the dynamic situation. It has to be more simplified. The leaders need to ensure that how do they keep the ship afloat. Now, the organization, the focus of the organization currently is on the survival and sustainability and replacing with exceeding the targets. So I think we need to adopt the performance management and the leaders needs to focus more on the softer aspects. How are people managing the crisis? How do they respond to rapidly the changes that organizations are implementing to keep the business continuity? So I think employee also understand the financial setback that employer are facing. So, and also I feel that they are investing time and giving their 100%, more than 100% to ensure how do they speed up recovery. So I think more than this year performance on the quantitative, I think the organization needs to focus more on the behavioral and the people skills of the employees, and how do we rethink the strategy, focus on the process improvement. The KPIs has to be more around digital transformation. So these are the 3-4 things that we need to focus around, and also the KPIs has to be more short-term and project-based, so that people have clarity on how do they achieve, because there's no point keeping long-term. The situation is still very fluid. You never know what happens tomorrow. So I think the focus has to be more on short-term and specific projects with clarity. So trust and transparency has to be more, and like Bhupesh said, there has to be over and over communication to all the teams there. So we also adopted the approach of a concept of OKR for the senior leadership team, where we gave them 3 quarterly projects and tasks that helps to cascade down the teams. So that has also helped us to the senior management to give clarity and transparency in the system.
Thanks Anjali, and thanks Rahul for giving some very different perspectives on this. And we have some questions which I'm now going to direct the next one to Anirudh. There's a question from the audience, which is how to measure performance when people are handling multiple roles. And to this, Anirudh, I'm just going to add one more bit with your permission, which is also the paradox of effort versus results, which is, the effort is all geared toward futuristic, whereas results is all about the real cash flow, right? So how is one actually looking at balancing the two? So Anirudh, over to you.
So I think very rightly said, Priya. I think efforts cannot always be rewarded, but I think they have to be recognized. So the outcomes are to be measured in a more tangible manner. And whatever is measured gets recognized and rewarded. But I would like to add here that the leaders of the organization as well as HR professionals have a responsibility to identify the talent of the company and develop their potential. So in real terms, Shoppers Stop incentivizes people based on outcomes and business results. And promotions and increments are done on the basis of efforts, meritocracy and competencies. Of course, performers in a positive and accommodating markets are rewarded. So market scenario also plays an important role. But I think like Rahul had said earlier, managers who make a turnaround in a difficult and adverse market situations deserve more, if not, equal rewards. So we believe that managers who overcome setbacks and failures in difficult situations, they are key for long-term business sustainability. I also want to add that levers for measuring performance is constantly evolving in the COVID scenario. So targets are moving, and like Bhupesh and Anjali had said earlier, monthly and quarterly reviews are there and changes are done towards the target. And the levers are, of course, move towards cost optimization, process improvements. They are more moved towards digital and omni-channel sales. On the stores, it has moved more towards conversions because footfalls have gone down. But on the digital front, the same set of levers will have different matrices. So for example, in an omni-channel setup, average bill value online is much lower than in a physical store. While repeats or frequency of purchase by the customer is much higher in an online setup. So there has been a lot of conversion at the store from physical to digital purchases. So all this is getting included in our reward structures. As far as the question is concerned, I think how do we reward people who are working in teams and who are working in different CFTs? Outcome of the CFTs is important. So we had recently implemented SAP and it was a joint effort, but each contributor had a different role to play. So there were people from marketing, there were people from finance, And everybody, though they had met their own timelines, they had different milestones to achieve. And if the individuals are achieving their milestones, that is the recognition or the reward that the individual should achieve. But overall, as a team, they should be able to achieve their overall goal. So that's how I would say that recognition and incentivization can happen at the CFT level.
Sure. So so I think one perspective of that question also is, and maybe Mukta, if you want to give your views on this, is if you have people who are in multiple roles. Yeah, I mean, then, and I don't know if Marks and Spencer's have that situation, but if there are people in multiple roles, how would one really look at, measuring their performance?
Oh, absolutely. Priya, I think very similar to some of the things that we are hearing, there are people who play multiple roles. And I think we've all had to look at acquiring different kind of skills, work with each other in a very different manner. And we're doing a lot more. I think the effort, to your point, is so amplified at this, in the current times. And then kind of agree with what Anirudh said, at this point in time, we're all kind of trying to ensure that we are recognizing all the efforts that are going in. And we do regular, recognition ceremonies to kind of call out our people, the contributions they're making, use the internal social media, platform that we have, the Social Connect, to ensure we amplify their stories, colleagues that are going above and beyond. We're also trying to give them extra opportunities, whether it's through training programs, whether it's through interactions with the leaders. So it's I think right now it's packaged in not a necessarily very monetary manner, but I think there is also that aspect that is coming in from an organization standpoint as we continue. We recently revised our benefits proposition, and we put a massive thrust around health and well-being. So, whether it was video medicine, whether it's, extending all these benefits to our colleagues and their families, not just colleagues, but their extended families, including parents, mental well-being support that we are giving. I think it's a combination of all the things. And as a brand, we take a lot of pride to say we've stood by our people. We've not done any pay cuts. We've not impacted people. We've stood by them, and we've made good our commitment of, being there for our people. And amongst all of this also comes this whole continuous, as I said earlier, the whole aspect of continuous performance management, where we're giving that feedback that helps them understand in a more constructive manner that, they're important, they're doing extremely well, and start to move this conversation to a more long-term career. What are their aspirations? Understanding how we are wanting to develop and invest in them. I think it's become a lot more intangible in the current times, while demonstrating in spirit that we are here for you for the long term, and we will invest in your career from that standpoint. So it's various elements that are coming together to evolve your proposition as an employer for your colleagues to remain committed, to continue to go above and beyond. There are emails, that we kind of circulate, the celebration that we're putting behind it. In spirit, that continues. The heroes that we are calling out, the trophies that we still continue to give, the certificates that, and we're also, our MD is kind of doing special notes that he's signing and sending to the families. I think it's just making them feel special. And a very, very important part of the M&S family is how we're leveraging the spirit of the effort that is coming in. And we know when the time is right, we would want to make good, linked to what their aspirations are, make things happen for our people. So I think that's the commitment. And as leadership team, we are standing, in front of our colleagues to make these commitments, to ensure that they see us standing in solidarity, because they're supporting the organization in a time which is turbulent, and we will stand by our people through ensuring that they have long-term careers to look forward to at M&S.
Thanks so much, Mukta. Thanks a ton. I've got two messages which say that we have just got a few more minutes left, and we have two questions. So I'm going to request Mr. Bhupesh if he can address this question on how to design reward system when the structure is in chaos. And then there's a follow-up one for you, specifically for you, Aniruddha, which is on employees who work for online channel, who have worked and have been on their roles in tough times, be rewarded more as compared to an offline employee who got a chance to serve in second half of the year. So we'll start with Bhupesh, and maybe Aniruddha, if you can answer the next question. Go ahead, Bhupesh.
Yeah, thanks. What I hear the question was, how do we reward people in times of chaos, right? How do we measure that? I think...
yes, how to design reward systems during when structure is in chaos.
Okay. The structure is in chaos, and I think will be in continuous chaos for some time now. We as business leaders very often make the mistake of tending to focus on the uncertainties of life. You know, this is not working, that's not working, and that's human nature sometimes, just to focus on negatives. I would rather step back and, encourage the entire team to focus on the certainties of the business. These are the building blocks on which we need to build the company further. So if I look back at our company, the legacy of so many years that you've built, the client base you've developed over time, the reputation you have got, the client loyalty you might have developed, the staff loyalty you might have developed are the certainties that you've already got. I'd rather put my business future on those certainties and then cross the stream that comes ahead. And that's from a business perspective. If I drill it down to an employee perspective, as me as an individual, what can I do? The same formula. What are the certainties that I have got on myself? For example, what is my expertise? What are my skills? What is my learning? What is my adaptability? What's my sense of ownership? What do I need to be developing further in the next few years in the changing time? The times have changed. That's not in your control. What is in your control is how you choose to respond to that. Building on that, I would evolve. I'm just reacting to the question. I would evolve a performance system that reinforces the strengths of the business so that when something unusual happens, you know how to react. I would evolve a thing that reinforces the strengths of the employee and develop those skills, because my team member might have a different set of skills and jointly we will do it together. So by building on the strengths of the business and building on the strengths of the employee, that's in my control, get ready to face the uncertainties. And I think that's how I would evolve the performance structure and keep evaluating quarter on quarter. That's my response to that.
Thanks, Bhupesh. Aniruddha, over to you.
Yeah, I think a very valid question has been asked. So during the lockdown, a lot of our employees were at home, and front-end employees were also at home, and back-end employees are still working from home. But I think we wanted all the employees to contribute, and everyone in the respective functions was working on a bounce back plan, was working on how to deal with supply chain constraints, was working, HR was working on engagement and how to improve confidence of employees, on communicating. They were planning for staff shortages, for planning for, when the store opens, how to safely get the employees back, how to safely welcome the customers, and everybody was planning for the long haul. And things were quite uncertain. So we had our front-end associates also call up employees and push for online sales. So really, if you ask me, nobody was as such workless or jobless sitting at home, and everybody was contributing. And therefore, whatever work employees were doing, they will get rewarded when things normalize, and of course, when we have much improved cash flows. But if you ask me, in comparison, everybody was working towards online channel sales or cost optimization, or looking at supply chain issues, or was looking at inventory levels. So that, I hope, responds.
Yeah. And I think, Aniruddha, your question is a very real question. I can imagine a lot of us are going to be getting this when we get into the performance and discussions. But I think you're right. I think the times have been tough. And I want to go back to what each one of you also shared, which is, I think it's been all hands on deck. And I don't think we can ever say that, this person has not contributed only because you've been sitting at home, because we've seen that people working from home, and it's perhaps been even more tough for them. Always, I think we've maintained that the real warriors are our front-end employees who've taken those risks and gone to the stores and been in those volatile situations. So I think there will always be a special place for all our retail employees. And I think it will be translated in the way the organizations also look at recognizing them. And I think I'm going to, try to bring the conversation or this panel to a conclusion now, because we're also running out of time. I think what I've picked up from some of the insights that all of you have shared, I think one is all hands on deck, and the focus is on business, business priority. And those priorities may be changing by the month, by the quarter, but I think the focus has been on that. And therefore, I think one input that Mukta had shared was it has moved from individual to collectivism in the performance. I think everybody is looking at how together can I move the organization in the forward direction. I think that's something that's come across. And therefore, a lot more of CFTs have come into place in the organizations. And I know that organizations are also looking at, hey, while there are individual KRAs and there are deliverables, but we also need to look at how have they contributed to some of these CFTs. And some of the CFTs may have short-term, or some of them may have medium to long-term results being coming in. So there is a balance of the effort as well as the results that the organizations are looking at. In some places, the efforts are being recognized and not necessarily brought into a performance management system, but a lot more focus in the performance management system continues to be on the deliverables that the individual is bringing into table. I think the next theme I've taken back with me is the bit on simplicity. How do you simplify the process, remove the fear out of the process? I think that's a very important bit that Rahul had also shared. And also make sure that, you are able to also bring in those people discussions, but it's not linked to the performance, right? You made the talent discussion separate from this. I think for me, the biggest revelation also was in the conversation yesterday with Bhupesh, where Bhupesh said, hey, listen, we use this. Also, this became an opportunity to do a huge change management in the organization. There was a business model change, and there was also a change in the way the employment model took place. And the input on how some of the leaders have used models of OKR during this time, and driving it really right from the top. And I think the one thread I picked up from across was this whole communication and over communication, and the leadership leading the communication, I think has been a very key, takeaway. It's something that even Titan believes in, because I think when leaders walk the talk and they are the ones who come in the front end during these crisis times and do the communication, I think it does have its a very positive stroke on the employees. So thank you so much for all your inputs. I think it was interesting for me to have this conversation with all of you yesterday and now today in this panel. Thank you so much. And I do hope we all have a good and a safe festive season. And like how Aniruddha was saying yesterday, the new words are rate of recovery. And I'm sure that all of us will be on a very good path of the rate of recovery that we have in our businesses. Thank you so much for your time today, and also for sharing candidly. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Priya.
Thank you.
Thanks, Priya.
Bye-bye.